And again, my name is Donna Macalle-Holly. I'm the Grant and Program Director for the Lake Hopatcong Foundation. Joining me today in the presentation is Jess Murphy, our President and Executive Director. Today we're going to be speaking about Lake Hopatcong, the Lake-Friendly Living Guide. So Mel, if you'd like to go to the first slide. Okay, so we're going to be taking a little different approach for the presentation here today. And what we're going to be doing is asking folks to take a series of poll questions. We want to tell you that the poll questions are completely anonymous. We cannot see your answers. We just wanted the presentation to be a little more interactive today. So the first question, Mel is going to post that for us. Okay, the first question is, do you live in the Lake Hopatcong watershed? So you have yes, no, or unsure. So if you would like to, please just take a moment to answer your poll, select your answer, and then just hit submit. And then Mel will share the responses with us. Okay, Mel, you want to go ahead and show us the poll responses for that? Okay, it looks like we have a pretty even split. We have about 53 people that live within the watershed and 47% that do not live in the watershed. So, and no one is unsure, so that's great to know. So if you wouldn't mind, please closing the poll, Mel. So basically we want to just talk. It seems like everyone is familiar with the watershed concept. So this is the Lake Hopatcong watershed. You can see our watershed is relatively small compared to our lake. The watershed really is just anywhere, if you're standing anywhere within that outlined area, that the water from that area will drain into Lake Hopatcong. I had a little demonstration that I'm going to show you anyway, even though everyone seems to know what a watershed is, but just because I like to do this little demonstration. So I have here just your typical funnel. And imagine if this blue funnel is the line as you see on the map here, where our watershed is, okay? And if I take my little picture here and I pretend this is a rainstorm, if I pour it right in the end of the funnel, you could see that it drains into my Pyrex dish right here, which is my make-believe Lake Hopatcong. So that's basically what the watershed does. So anywhere you're standing, water will drain into, our case, a lake. It will then it can drain into a river, a bay, a stream. And the Lake Hopatcong watershed, we're part of the Musconetcong watershed, which is in the upper Delaware region. And from the Delaware, the water drains into the Atlantic Ocean. So that's where we are in our watershed. Mel, if you want to give me the next slide, please. Okay, so this is a picture of stormwater runoff. So why are we starting with stormwater runoff? That's because stormwater runoff is one of the primary causes of what brings pollutants into our lake. So this is a picture I had taken with my husband when we were driving along the road in one of the 4 towns around the lake, and I yelled at my husband, "Stop, please stop. I want to take a picture of this stormwater runoff." This was from a construction site, a fairly big construction site. They did have the appropriate protections. Well, they had the protections up, but they weren't functioning properly. The dirt was sliding underneath the fencing, and that was causing that stormwater runoff. So really, stormwater runoff is just after a rain event, it comes in, it can infiltrate the groundwater, it flows over the impervious surfaces, such as this road here, rooftops, driveways, and the stormwater runoff picks up pollutants. So that's what one of the things we're going to focus on today is what homeowners and people around the lake can do to prevent stormwater runoff. Mel, if you want to go to the next slide, please. Okay, so what happens, why do we want to stop stormwater runoff? It really does have an impact on our aquatic life, which can be affected by the chemicals and and debris that runs into the lake. I mean, I'm sure many of you heard about, you know, in the ocean where the turtles and the fish in the ocean are harmed by, you know, all the trash in the oceans. The same thing can happen here in our lake, in any water body. It also causes a significant decline in water quality and the clarity in our lake from the pollutants that come in from this stormwater runoff. And as we know, it does increase our aquatic vegetation or weed growth, and it contributes to the hazardous algal blooms and the algae blooms that we do have on the lake. So that's why we really want to try to prevent the stormwater runoff, because one of the pollutants it does have is phosphorus, and phosphorus is the primary cause of what the primary pollutant of what causes the problems in Lake Hopatcong. So Mel, would you like to go to the next slide? So I'm going to turn it over to Jess Murphy, and she's going to tell you our format for today.
Let me unmute first. Okay, thanks so much, Donna. I really appreciate that setup. And as you can see, the Lake-Friendly Living Guide, which you can see this is a cover right here. We have 15 strategies are explained in the guide. In the interest of time, we aren't going to be able to touch on all of them. You can take a quick look at them there. And I'll tell you a little bit more at the end about how you can download the guide. But we're gonna just focus on the ones you can see that are circled in red. Those are the ones we're gonna focus on today, but obviously they're all very important. We just decided those are the ones that probably would be most relevant to those of you listening in today. So I think before we go on to the next, well, if you want to go to the next slide, the first thing we're going to focus on is reducing impermeable surfaces. And before we go into it, we'll add another one of those poll questions. So Mel, if you want to post it, it's which types of pervious or porous surfaces do you have around your home? And so you can check any of the items there if you have any of them in place. We'll give it a second for everybody to think about. All right, if everybody's had a chance to hopefully check those boxes, Mel, if you want to go ahead and generate the results for us to take a look at. All right. Lots of lawns, not a huge surprise, but it looks like we've got some other great stuff in there. We've got we got rain garden, vegetative buffers, pervious pavers, and a gravel driveway. So our parking area. And yeah, so it looks, I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about lawns shortly. There are things you can do to help when it comes to adjusting the size of your lawn and things like that. But it looks like we've got a good mix of other pervious surfaces. So good job, everybody. All right. With that covered, let's go to the next slide, Mel. So one of the strategies to protect the lake is to reduce impervious surfaces. Impervious surfaces are surfaces that allow little or no stormwater infiltration into the ground. Going back to that picture Donna had shown, you know, that roadway is an impervious surface. And as Donna explained, impervious surfaces create stormwater runoff, which leads to issues of nutrient overload and declining water quality and other issues. So ways that you can lessen your impervious footprint at your home are keeping your paved driveways as small as possible. So if you have parts of your driveway or overflow parking that aren't used regularly, you can try to use more porous materials or pervious items instead. Even gravel can, over time, can compact. So you got to keep a close eye on any gravel driveways you have, because eventually that can become impervious. Some strategies you can use are putting in a stone pathway across your lawn instead of poured concrete for pathways. We also have, you know, everybody's rooftop is impervious. So if you are doing work on your house or you're doing new construction, trying to think about building upward instead of out when possible, that will help reduce the amount of impervious surface on your property. In addition, there are these newer pervious pavement technologies you can use, whether for concrete, you know, permeable interlocking concrete pavers, permeable clay brick pavers. There's also porous asphalt, and this is one of the times I'm going to give a shout out to the Lake George Association. We had a meeting with them a Zoom meeting recently, and they were showing us a video of some porous asphalt that they are using for their for some projects up at Lake George, and it was amazing. It wasn't. I don't have the same ability as Donna did to be able to show it in person right now on the webinar, but they did show us a video of just pouring buckets of water onto this block of concrete, and you just watched it go right through. I'm going to post the link to it in the chat box if you to the Lake George Association's efforts to have more porous concrete in the chat box. So if you wanted to click on that, you could take a look at some of the work they're doing up there. And we, of course, always find ourselves emulating what the great work that's going on up at Lake George. So I will post that in just a moment in the chat box, but I will keep talking for now. The other things I'd like to just mention about the porous asphalt is they're often more expensive, but it's generally worth it for the investment in the health of the lake and the waters near where you live. And you can generally get any look you want. There are a lot of options out there. So if you have your heart set on a certain look for your property, you can almost definitely find it with porous options. So with that in mind, we will go to the next slide, and I'm going to ask. So the next slide kind of covers two of the strategies, limiting your lawn size and being smart about lawn care. And so we have another question for y'all. It should be a relatively easy one. And Mel can post it for us. It's, do you use fertilizer on your lawn? And while you guys are answering that, I'm going to post that link in the chat. So, let me see. Okay. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to view that, so or to answer that question. So Mel, if you want to go ahead and close out that poll and share it with us. All right, most people do not use fertilizer, so very good. That's not rushing into the thing. And as Donna said, it's completely anonymous, so we aren't going to shame anybody who uses fertilizer, but we'll talk to you a little bit more about that in this section. So if you want to go to the next slide, Mel. All right. So many homeowners around Lake Hopatcong have grass lawns that lead right down to the lake shore. And traditional lawns, I know they can be beautiful, but they can cause excessive plant and algal growth in the lake. They can cause shoreline erosion and sedimentation, loss of wildlife habitat, and an increase in nuisance animals. Donna's going to talk more about riparian buffers and things later, but they can help prevent geese from popping up on your lawn. So I know that's another battle everyone is always dealing with around here. Lawns absorb less rainfall than natural areas. Natural wooded areas have layers of vegetation with a canopy and understory and ground cover, and the branches and leaf litter from those plants break down into a layer called duff, and that protects the soil from the impact of the rain and keeps it in place instead of eroding. Roots hold the ground in place too, and water can soak into the ground, and then pollutants can be filtered out, and groundwater can be replenished. So that's one reason to, when you're planning your lawn on your property, trying to limit the lawn size and having that kind of natural wooded area instead is preferable for the health of the lake. In addition, when you're taking care of your lawn and your property, keeping leaves and lawn clippings out of the street, ditches, storm drains, and streams by bagging them, or even better, composting them, is a great way to go. In addition, make sure you're picking up pet waste. That seems like a relatively obvious thing, but it definitely helps. Helps keep the bacteria and phosphorus from entering the lake, and this one kind of breaks my daughter's heart, but also not feeding the wildlife as much as we love to feed the birds that we'll see. My kids always loved to feed ducks. 4 geese, as Dr. Love now has told us, 4 geese is the equivalent of 1 septic system on the lake. So if you're encouraging these birds to be on the lake, you're also increasing the chance for this phosphorus from them to get into the lake. So it's a reason to not feed the wildlife as much as we want to be earth friendly and take care of our animals. We don't want to take care of them in that way. So we're going to have a bonus question here on this slide, which Mel can post, but I'll let her post it and see. We'll see how many. There's been public campaigns going on around this one, around the lake, but we're hoping to see that it's all settled into your brains. So if you do fertilize your lawn, there are 3 numbers on fertilizer bags. The number for phosphorus should always be 0. So which number on the bag is that? There are 3 numbers in a line, and which one should be 0. And we'll give you all a moment to answer that one. All right. Mel, do you want to show us the answer? We can see. All right, so most people got it right, which is the second number. That middle number should be 0. So good job, everybody. Bravo. And if you aren't sure, that's okay. Now you know. So if you use, as Donna mentioned, the nutrient that is most relevant to the growth of algae on our lake is phosphorus. So that's why when you're buying, if you do have to use fertilizer, when you're using it, you want to make sure it's phosphorus free. It's the NPK analysis, so P is in the middle, and that should be 0. A single pound of phosphorus can support more than 1,100 pounds of algae in the lake. And on top of that, more phosphorus means less fish, because as algae decays, water is robbed of dissolved oxygen, and that devastates fish populations. Anybody who was here last year knows what algae can do to the lake and the repercussions that we can face. And in general, you should try to use chemicals as a last resort on your property, both for fertilizer or as you want to use pesticides sparingly. Rutgers offers a low-cost soil testing kit, soil test, to determine whether you even need to use fertilizer. So I would recommend, that's also actually in our lake guide, but I'd recommend looking into that. If you do use fertilizer, or you're thinking about it, you can have your soil tested, and that will help determine whether you actually need to use it, and if you do, exactly what kind to use and where you need it. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Donna to go through a couple more strategies for everyone.
Hi, sorry about that. The next one we have is, it's very important, is maintaining your septic system. So the reason we focused on stormwater runoff and septic systems is they are the 2 primary causes of what brings the nutrients into our lake. So even if if many of the homes around the lake and a couple of the town do have sewers, but if you go visit someone on the lake, a friend or a family that has a septic system, you should really be mindful of when you're using their toilet on, that they have a septic system. So we're going to share some tips on that. So for those of you that have sewers, please bear with us, because this is really a very important area that we have to address. So Mel, if you'd like to go to the next slide, please. So we're not going to get into a lot of details on how the septic systems function, but this is really just a quick picture of, how a septic system functions. But we want to say that the pollutants found in household wastewater, such as nitrogen, phosphorus, disease-causing bacteria and viruses, they can harm both Lake Hopatcong and our groundwater. And there are different types of septic systems. There's the traditional types of septic systems, and many of the homes around the lake have what we refer to as alternate septic systems, because the site or the soil conditions on the property are limiting, or when wastewater strength is too much for a particular site, like a restaurant, then they use those alternative types of septic systems. Here at my house in Jefferson Township, I have an alternate system that's called a HOOT system that we installed about 5 years ago. Not that our septic system was failing at the time, but we thought that this would be a more environmentally friendly approach for the lake. So we recommend that you inspect your system every 2 to 3 years. However, if you live in Jefferson Township, as I do, Jefferson Township does have a septic management ordinance, which requires that your septic system is pumped out every 3 years. So This is very helpful because if you don't remember to pump out your septic system, you'll get a very nice letter, friendly reminder from the health department in town telling you if you haven't pumped out your septic system to please schedule it for a pump out. And then you're required to provide that documentation once this pump out occurs to the township. So I have, since Jefferson has been had this ordinance in place, I keep all the records of my pump out just in case if anyone asks that I'm not pumping it out. So it is a great ordinance for us. As far as the rest of the towns around the lake, Mount Arlington is sewer, Roxbury Township has sewers, and Hopatcong is partially sewered, as some of you may have heard. Hopatcong is going to be installing some sewers along Crescent Cove, Hudson Ave and Crescent Cove. So that will be a great help. But as far as I know, they don't have a formal septic maintenance ordinance in place in the Pakong Borough. So that's something that hopefully we can work with the town to implement for those remaining towns that are on septic systems. So now here's the part where we want to talk a little bit about the do's and don'ts of your septic system. So it's very important that you don't put any kinds of hazardous things down your sinks or toilets. So what do we consider to be hazardous? Of course, you don't want to dump oil down your septic or your sink, or oil-based or acrylic paints, no varnishes, pesticides, insecticides, paint thinners, organic solvents or degreasers, no drain openers, because that will kill the good bacteria in your septic system, which makes it function. You also want to avoid putting things down your toilet that could clog your pipes. So no diapers, no coffee grounds, believe it or not. Don't put your coffee grounds down the toilet. Cat box litter, no sanitary napkins, no paper towels, or none of the wipes that so many of us are using today, more than we probably ever used them in our lives. No wipes, no grease or fat. And then the one thing, we were going to make this a question, but the one thing you should not put down your toilet as well is tissues, because tissues don't break down the same way that toilet paper does. So when you're using a tissue, be sure to throw it in the trash. I mean, you want to make sure that you're caring for your drain field. Don't park on your drain field unless it's specifically designed to have parking on it. A lot of the smaller homes around the lake have septic systems that are designed so they can drive over the drain field, but you have to make sure that that's the way your system is designed, or else you could cause damage to that drain field by parking cars on it. The other thing you don't want to do on your drain field is you don't want to plant any kind of deep-rooted plants that could cause damage to the drain fields, because it would cause problems. And so Mel, if you want to just go to the next slide, please. I love this picture that Mel found for the one of the signs of the failed system. You know, if you're walking around your neighborhood and you smell that odor, and most of us know what a failing septic system smells like, that's like one sure sign that you should call someone in to check to see if your septic is functioning properly. Another area that you could look at is if there's pooling water or muddy soil around the tank, the drain field, or even in your basement. If you're having any kind of backups while you're flushing your toilet, that's another sign that your septic could be failing. And if there's a change in the grass color. So if you think your septic is failing, we ask that you please call to find out. If you're walking around your neighborhood and you smell an odor, if you know where the odor is coming from, if that person is your neighbor, by all means, try to go over and ask the person, hey, have you had your septic checked? It sounds like there might be it smells like there might be a problem with it. And, if that approach doesn't work, we have had people contact the Lake Hopatcong Foundation, or even when I was with the Lake Hopatcong Commission, to call to, say if they think there's a failing septic in the area. And we'll do what, you could do by just calling the health department. So around our lake, Hopatcong Borough has their health department at the county level. So you'd have to call Sussex County Health Department. And then the other 3 towns, Mount Arlington, Roxbury, and Jefferson Township, their health department is at the municipal level. So you could report what a potentially failing septic to the health departments. I have to tell you, in most of cases when I've had to report a failing septic system, the health department was already aware of the situation and they were trying to remediate the problem with the property owner. But that, you know, if we can just, you know, emphasize the importance of maintaining your system, that will really help Lake Hopatcong's water quality. Next slide, Mel. Okay, so now we have another question here, Mel. Okay, this question asks, do you have a rain garden or shoreline buffer on your property? If you have a rain garden and a buffer, you could check multiple questions, multiple answers. Okay, Mel, go ahead, please. Okay, so 11% have a rain garden, 39 have a buffer, and 61% do not have either. So thank you very much for helping us with that one. If you want to close the poll, Mel. So this one here, we're going to talk about how we can capture and infiltrate stormwater. So I want to just say very briefly that, you know, it might seem like this, you know, this would be difficult to do, but if there's anything we ask you to take away from this is, if everyone that lives within the Lake Hopatcong watershed try to use one of these 3 things, either installing a vegetative buffer, planting a rain garden, or even using native plants, every little bit would help to filter the stormwater runoff. So Mel, if you want to go to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is a picture of a very, you know, pretty wide buffer. It's at probably a park area that I can tell you I have, I live on the lake and I have a very small property, and my buffer is very small. It has a black-eyed Susie's, it has some red cardinal flowers in it, but it's not, it's probably about 2 feet in width. But it does make a difference. So it's really a vegetative buffer is just natural vegetation or native plants that you put along your shoreline of your body and to try to intercept stormwater runoff. Okay, and you use the native plants because of the way they can help. They'll bring wildlife to your yard. They bring hummingbirds. They bring insects that are great for the lake. And the vegetative buffers, they help to stabilize the soil and reduce erosion. They filter the pollutants and the sediments. They absorb the nutrients because they have those deep roots on them. Native plants typically have deep roots and they can filter the nutrients. They also, you know, native plants, once they're established, you really don't have to spend a lot of time gardening them. They'll kind of take care of themselves. And you know, you don't have to replant native plants every year, unlike other ornamental plants that might not come back every year. So this way, it's a great way to, you know, save you time and money. And as I said, it provides food and shelter for wildlife. And the other thing it does when you have a buffer on your yard, it helps keep the geese off. I told this story at the webinar briefly once before that, you know, I had a new neighbor that took down his buffer when he brought the property 2 doors down from me. You know, he took down the tree and he pulled out some plants, and then the geese were coming up on his beautifully sodded new lawn, and he was wondering why. And I said, well, that's what they want. And you took down their, you know, you made it easy for them to come up. And because we don't have fences in between our lawns, the geese were then just migrating over to my lawn there too. So the buffers really do help keep the geese off. And just one other word while we're talking about geese, we want to ask everyone, you know, as Jess said, please don't feed the the geese on the lake, because it really just encourages them to stay here long, and we really want to try to prevent that. Okay, next slide, Mel. Okay, so this is a rain garden, and it's a very, it's a picture of a small rain garden. And the reason we like this, it kind of shows how a rain garden can capture runoff. And from here you can see it's taking the runoff from the downspouts from the roof, heading into that rain garden. Some rain gardens do, which are just like a depression that, have native plants in them, and they filter the water. So you can see some rain gardens take the runoff from driveways, but this rain garden was not designed to do that. And you can see where the water from the driveway is just running into the catch basin there, and then discharging right into a pipe, into a stream or river. So, depending on how your rain garden can be designed, what type of runoff it can take. And here on the lake, you could either design it for the front of your house, the lake side of your house, or you could design it for the street side of your house. Also, a lot of other homes on the lake, if you notice, a lot of other homes on the lake have driveways that go right down into the lake, and that's for people to, easily launch your boat. So if you have one of those on your home and you're able to, not use that as a launch ramp and possibly launch your boat somewhere else, you could pull up the end of that driveway, and that would be a great place to put native plants, because when you have those driveways into the lake, they just run the water right in from the street, right down into the lake, and there's nothing there to filter it, and it's bringing in all those pollutants with the phosphorus. So we really want to try to prevent that. So this one here, we talked about how it helps to filter the pollution. The other thing that rain gardens do is help prevent flooding. So we recently launched in cooperation with the Lake Hopatcong Commission, an opportunity for homeowners within the watershed to get rebates if they install a rain garden. So Rutgers is doing a series of workshops. We held 2 already this year, and we have 2 more that will be scheduled for either the winter, spring of 2021. And the way that works is once you listen in on that workshop, then you can schedule an appointment with Rutgers to have a follow-up appointment where Rutgers will design a rain garden or a riparian buffer for your home at no cost. You get their labor and their expertise for free. And then if you install a rain garden or buffer, the grant will provide up to $450 for a rebate for you. So you get the cost of it, part of the cost covered from this grant from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. So our goal is to have 16 rain gardens installed within the watersheds through this grant program within the next 2 years. So the one area, our colleague Caitlin, her friends installed a rain garden, and she tells us that one of the reasons that they wanted to install it is because their property was causing a flooding property on their neighbor's property. They installed this rain garden in the back of their yard, and voila, the flooding problem, even during the recent tropical storm we had, was very minimal. The runoff went directly to the rain garden, it filtered it. They received $450 towards the cost of that rain garden, so it was a win-win for everybody. So rain gardens don't have to be difficult to install. After this, we will be sending out the presentation to all of you that are on the webinar today, and I'll also be sending a link from Rutgers that will tell you more about rain gardens and how simple they can be to install if you're interested in doing it on your own. Next slide, Mel. So I have to say, out of all the slides, I think Jess and I will probably tell you that we're most proud of this slide. And you probably say, why? Just because it's the native plant garden that we have at our building, the Lake Hopatcong Foundation Environmental and Cultural Center. We can thank our board chairman, Marty Kane, for, organizing this effort with volunteers and a lot of labor went into making this garden so beautiful as it is. But native plants are really the way to go, as I try to emphasize, are just the care of them. They don't require a lot of care. So I'm not a native plant expert by any means, but I just want to tell you what these photographs are of. The first one, and Marty, feel free to jump in if I'm saying anything that's incorrect regarding the plants here. The first one is columbine. The one in the middle is, of course, black-eyed Susies. Most people know that. We have the one with the butterfly is Joe Pyeweed. Down the next row down with the bug, all the way on the left, is boneset. We have the purple flowers. Underneath that is bergamot. They are really blooming beautifully this year in our garden. This one, the one in the middle, is elderberry. We actually had one of our volunteers come out and asked to pick some of the elderberry, and she made herself some elderberry jelly. So it's great use of the elderberry. And then down on the bottom is the red cardinal flowers. As I said, I have those cardinal flowers here, and they're great to bring hummingbirds to your backyard. So they're nice. And down on the other side, we have some other types of native plants. So we welcome all of you to please come out and see our native plant garden. Many of the plants are labeled, so if you see something you like, you can just take a picture of the name of the plant and then go to, your local forest to get that, your local nursery to get that type of plant. So that, go native. Can't emphasize that enough.
And Donna, native plant sale next spring is coming again.
Yes, our native plant sale did very well this year. We have people being able to order online, and we'll take that approach again next year because it worked out well, and hopefully we'll be able to sell plants in person as well. So thank you. Jess, you want to take it from here?
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Marty. And so you can see our Lake Hopatcong Lake-Friendly Living Guide. I've got it here too, but you can see it on the screen. We're very thankful for that. You can see the link there. If you just go to our website and go under what we do, environment, Holly, who's on this as well, has done a ton of work on our website, and it should be nice and easy to find. It's one of the things that's listed under what we do under the environment banner. And it is, it's got information about all the things we talked about today, as well as the other items that we didn't, that we kind of cut from this program for time, but are available to get more information on if you want to download the guide. We need to acknowledge that it was putting it together was made possible, and printing it was made possible by through a grant from the Watershed Institute. So our ability to publish it is possible because of them, and they've supported several initiatives for us. With Donna as our grants director, has done a lot of work on getting money for programs like this, and this is one of the good ones. We also have to thank our friends at the Lake George Association, Walt Lenders on this call, and the Candlewood Lake Authority, because they both provided some assistance for us with this project. They had done a lot of the tough work to get it to get it established, and then we were able to take it and make it a little more focused on the Lake Pakong area. But you can download it, and things we talked about today are in there, but there's all kinds of other information on there about how you can be a lake-friendly homeowner or resident around the lake. I think we can go to the next slide. Just want to tell you a little bit about, the last item on that list of things you could do was support the Lake Hopatcong Foundation. We are a nonprofit that's dedicated to protecting the lake environment and enhancing the lake experience, bringing together public and private resources to encourage a culture of sustainability and stewardship on and around New Jersey's largest lake for this and future generations. And we do that through a number of programs and initiatives in these mission areas you can see listed here. Obviously programs like this fit under our environmental banner, but we also have our water scouts that seek out invasive species, and a number of other, we've been very involved with the Lake Hopatcong Commission and their efforts to do the HAB prevention projects. We also have something that's near and dear to my heart, our education program and our field trip program that we usually would be doing out of Hopatcong State Park. Obviously, with schools closed, we've been limited in that regard this year. But we also have our floating classroom, and if you haven't had a trip out there, that's another thing that's inspired by our visit to Lake George. And Lake George Association has a floating classroom that we visited several years ago, and were so inspired we needed to bring it here. So we have those under normal circumstances would be running in the summer. Obviously in COVID times, we've been limited. We've tried to bring the community together at this building where I am right now, the old Lake Hopatcong train station, which is now the Lake Hopatcong Environmental and Cultural Center. We also have usually, again, in a normal year, we would have our block party, which brings everyone together from around the lake. We try to do whatever we can. You know, it's 4 towns, 2 counties, and we try to do what we can to support the broader lake community, because we have a lot in common, no matter which town we're in. We have a number of programs with public safety, including our dock numbering program and our partnership with the state police and the Morris County Sheriff's Office. And then arts and culture, we have a number of programs that we do, including programs like this. We try. Normally we would be having in-person programs here at the station. Now we're doing them all virtually for the time being, and that is a good opportunity. I'll let Donna kind of give a shout out to an arts and culture program we have coming up next week, actually. Donna, do you want to share?
Yes, next week we are going to be opening up our vestibule only, the middle room of our building. We're going to be having a Smithsonian poster exhibit in recognition of the adoption of the 19th Amendment for women's right to vote. So we're going to be sending information out about that tomorrow in our e-newsletter that Holly works so hard to send out every week to everyone, and also will be posted on Facebook. And then we also have our next Lunch and Learn, of course, that we have scheduled. It's going to be a Thursday, September 3rd. It's hard to believe it's going to be September. I know everyone's anxious for 2020 to be over with, but it's hard to believe it's September. And Marty Kane and Lori Kane will be showing us the Greetings from Bertram's Island. It's about a 47-minute show on Bertram's Island, and then they will be leading a discussion and Q&A regarding Bertram's Island. For those of you that don't know, that was an amusement park on Lake Hopatcong that closed in 1983. So that's some of the upcoming programs that we have.
And with that, we're going to just answer some questions. I know, Donna, you were going to start with, Larry Orland sent us a question over email yesterday. So, oh, there we go. Go ahead, Donna.
So
I know you're
Larry Orleans is a section of the lake that had some HABs last year, and he installed a fountain system in front of his home, and he wanted to know if that would help to mitigate or prevent hazardous algal blooms. So the type of fountain that Larry installed really wasn't designed to mitigate algal blooms. It will help to move the water around so it doesn't become stagnant, and it is very visually appealing, but that type of system is really not designed like other air systems to mitigate hazardous algal blooms. The commission did receive that, and they are going to put in 3 systems around the lake over the next 2 years that were more specifically designed to mitigate hazardous algal blooms. So they're demonstration projects that the Princeton Hydro will be overseeing the installation, and they're doing pre and post monitoring of those devices to see how effective they are going to be to mitigate hazardous algal blooms. So now we have some other questions, Mel, that you want to go through. Are there any other questions that we have that we need to answer?
It did look like most of them were answered. I know there was a question about who to call about a failing drain, but it looks like someone provided a number. And then Larry said that a lot of people are feeding the geese and the ducks, so maybe we have to do more advertising about not to do that. And yeah, it looks like most questions were answered, so I guess that's it.
It looks like we've got.
Yep. All right. So Tim asked, what is the effectiveness of the floating islands that were previously installed on the lake? And would it be worth for us to build our own DIY floating islands as many other lakes have promoted?
So the floating wetland islands that were installed in Ashley Cove a few years ago really haven't been able to, because that area of the lake is very stagnant and it is really subject to a lot of algal blooms there. They have a big, very big drainage pipe that goes into the lake there. They also have, you know, just a lot of shoreline erosion because there's not a lot of buffers along that section of the cove. So unfortunately, the floating wetland islands were not doing as much. I don't think the amount of floating wetland islands we put in there was sufficient for the size of the cove. So that really should be something that's looked at when you're looking to install these floating wetland islands. There is another project, the Lake Hopatcong Commission did just receive a second grant from DEP, and they are going to be installing some floating wetland islands in the landing channel within the next couple years. And if we have sufficient funding, we will look to try to put more floating wetland islands in the Ashley Cove area, one that will be more appropriately sized for that cove. Okay, I think we answered everybody's questions. We'd like to thank you all for joining us for our Lunch and Learn today, and we hope everybody has a beautiful weekend. Bye for now. Thank you.
Thank you.